Second half, Matt, was every bit as bad as we've had to put up with all season. It started off as it was actually a reasonably good start. We got ourselves in front inside a minute and 30 seconds. Well worked free kick on the edge of the box, which Luke Norris smashed into the bottom corner of the goal. The lead lasted all of about a minute or so. Non-existent defending led to a quick equaliser. The first half resembled a typical end of season affair between two sides that whose campaigns have long since been decided. They had all the intensity, all the pace of a training ground exercise or a pre-season friendly. Second half was utterly abysmal from start to finish. Rovers took a really good following support, as we often do, for fixtures that are within under 50, 60 miles of the Wirral. And the display in the second 45 minutes was pitiful. Utterly. It's just, I'm trying my hardest not to sort of go into expletives because it was so poor. And in many ways, that second half defined the season, because 16th position after 46 games in the 4th division of English football isn't good enough for Tranmere Rovers, and it should never be good enough. And I don't think you'll find a Rovers fan that will accept it or should accept it. But the majority of the players we saw on the pitch today at the WAM Stadium, I don't think many Rovers fans will be too bothered if they've left in the summer. There's a few that are still under contract, and I'm sure that'll lead into a much wider debate. But as a contest today, 2 penalties given away. They were down the far end, and in the second half, I moved behind the goal. I had my young daughter with me, so we spent the first 45 minutes in the seat, and then the second half we moved onto the terracing. But it was an awful performance. It really was, and wraps up what was an utterly forgettable and underwhelming campaign, unfortunately.
Finished the season with 1 fewer point compared to the 2022-2023 campaign. Finished the season having lost 23. 23. Half of Tranmere's league fixtures ended in defeat. It's a staggering amount. It really is. Only the bottom club, Forest Green, lost more games than Tranmere because they were beaten on 26 occasions. Colchester and Newport both lost 23 matches as well. Newport finished the season in disastrous fashion. I think they finished with 8 defeats in a row, didn't they? But 23 defeats is 5 more than Tranmere suffered last year, although they did pick up 2 more victories this season than they did in the 2022-2023 campaign. It's been dreadful. It really has. And that is something that we will investigate further in the future. But let's try and stay focused on this game to a degree, Craig. I mean, I think it was no surprise to see the same starting lineup named. I think that was absolutely fair enough, given the way the last match or the last 2 matches had gone. And despite the fact that Davis was back available and he was on the bench, and despite the fact that Wood was back available and he was on the bench, Norris and Hockenhull kept their place in the starting lineup. But it just didn't work, did it? And I think the surprising thing for me was that it took quite so long for changes to be made. I know Dennis comes on in the 51st minute, but even then there was little impact. And you've still got Hawkes or Taylor or whoever sitting on the bench, and it took until the 72nd minute to see any further changes.
Yeah, and I think Nigel had every reason to go with the same 11 because I wasn't at the Wimbledon game at home at Prenton Park last week. Matt, I know you were yourself, but from all accounts, it was a really good performance. It was a good display, and in many ways, we should have won by more goals from all accounts. So you can't really sort of point the finger at the manager and say, well, why didn't you change it up? It's just defined this Rovers group of players all season. They're just 1 step forward, 2 steps back. You'll have 2 good results, and then you'll have 3, 4 utter stinkers. Go back to March the 16th when we had that fantastic away win at the racecourse against Wrexham. We then followed it up with utterly abysmal showings against Crawley at home, and there were some really underwhelming performances that followed that. So these players, as a collective, and there are exceptions, the goalkeeper being one, Connor Jennings being another, obviously Robbie Apter, they're not good enough. And we are where we are because of that. So by definition, this game has just followed the pattern of the season, really. So yeah, he could have made changes earlier for sure. I'd like to have seen Hawks given more game time, especially given the fact he'd signed a new contract. So in many ways, he's more of the future of this football club. Rob Apter is, as great as it's been having Robbie at the club. But you know, it doesn't. It wouldn't have changed a great deal. It's been the pattern of the season. The players, the collective, just simply aren't up to the standard that we need in order to push forward. But 23 defeats is pitiful, utterly. If we could have just turned 5 or 6 of them into draws, we'd have been pushing for the top half of the table going into them final sort of 3 or 4 games, and then from there on, you don't know what's going to happen. So, I'll be glad to see the back of this season. We actually left early today, probably about 3 or 4 minutes early. We don't tend to do that, but there was an earlier train to catch, and as we walked down the station to the station, we found it was cancelled. So maybe the joke's on us.